Hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Anna Sheena and I'm the Product Marketing Manager here at Threat Connect. I'm going to take a few minutes to go over some housekeeping items and then the agenda, and then I'll introduce today's speaker. First, I want to let you know that everyone's phone lines are muted to keep background noise to a minimum. If you have questions, please ask them by typing them into the chat feature on your webinar console. We will answer all questions at the end of the webinar. Second, the webinar is being recorded today. We will be sending out the recording as soon as we have it available. Now for the agenda. Today we're talking about threat intelligence analysis. We'll talk about how to process available threat intelligence, how to build on threat research and perform additional analysis, and how to create better processes in your organization. We'll end with Q&A. Now I'll introduce today's speaker. Marika Chauvin is a senior threat intelligence researcher at Threat Connect. Prior to Threat Connect, Marika assisted in the development of Chevron's Cyber Threat Intelligence Center and spent several years as a contractor with the U.S. Department of State's Cyber Threat Analysis Division. A graduate of the University of Southern Mississippi and the American University, Marika currently lives in New Orleans with her husband, 2 cats, and puppy. Now that's it for me, and I'll turn it over to Marika.
Hey everybody. Thanks, Anna. So as she said, my name is Marika Chauvin, and I'm a senior threat intelligence researcher here at Threat Connect. So as analysts, it seems like we get new reporting all the time, like almost every day. And most of the time, it's really interesting, but very rarely is a single report comprehensive. And so because of that, we as analysts have to figure out how all of this information fits together and determine its value to our individual organization. This can be an incredibly time-consuming and inefficient process, especially if you don't have processes in place to kind of guide this type of analysis and research. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the process that I use to pull related information together and build on threat research that's published by security teams and intelligence providers. It's my hope that you might be able to take a few of the things that I do in my own research and apply it to the work that you're doing in your own organization. So this is kind of an overview of what I'm hoping that you get out of today's presentation. Then I'm going to start out by talking about some of the threat research related to Shamoon and Magic Hound, specifically information that's been published over the past several months. Using those reports as a jumping off point, I'm going to talk about building on that threat research to find more information that can be leveraged for network defense. Because as I'm sure you know,
Marika, I'm sorry, we can't see your screen. Would you mind sharing that?
Oh no.
There we go.
Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So sorry. Here's a list of the things that I'm really hoping that you get out of today's presentation. So as I said, I'm going to start out by talking about Magic Hound and Shamoon. I'm going to use those reports as a jumping off point and talk about building on that threat research because a lot of times these reports have a cutoff date, and so related information may not have either met that cutoff date, or it might not have been directly associated to the files or the malware sample that the report was originally based on. So oftentimes there's a lot more information, or at least some more information to be found. All right, so let's get started. Over the past several months, a number of reports have been published on Shamoon 2. And the activity that some companies are calling Magic Hound. And I'm going to talk about Magic Hound a little bit on the next slide. Shamoon is a wiper malware that we first heard about back in 2012 when it was used against Saudi Aramco. Now, since that first observed activity, researchers have publicly linked Shamoon to a threat actor with a likely nexus to Iran. Now, in November of 2016, a second batch of Shamoon activity was identified targeting Saudi Arabia-based entities. That campaign involved a few different waves of targeting efforts by the threat actors and is largely referred to as Shamoon 2. So in addition to publishing details about the Shamoon 2 targeting, security companies have published information related to a group that's being called Magic Hound. Magic Hound also has a likely nexus to the Middle East and has been observed leveraging infrastructure that overlaps with the infrastructure associated with Rocket Kitten. If you've read through these reports or browsed the indicators of compromise, you probably noticed that there are a couple of indicators that show up across several of these different reports. Specifically, we found similar indicators or the same indicator in these 3 reports. But the only way to know that for sure is to have some way to cross-reference this information. I don't know about you guys, but I've tried to do that cross-referencing manually across a number of different reports, but oftentimes it's absolutely awful, super time-consuming and inefficient, and sometimes I would miss something and end up having to go back and do it all over again. And so that brings me to my next point, which is building on threat research. So pulling all this information together and then performing additional analysis on it so you can identify those links. So the first thing that we need when we're furthering intelligence analysis that's published by an external party is to aggregate and store that information somewhere. In ThreatConnect, we have a source that pulls open source information that's published on technical blogs and things like that, and that's called the Technical Blogs and Reports source. In this source, it automatically pulls the report text and indicators from a given blog and populates it in ThreatConnect. And this enables the analyst, in this case me, to more easily visualize the data that's known about a given threat or threat actor and determine where some overlaps might exist and how I might be able to build off of that threat research. So for this line of research, I decided to start with this IP address because I found it in all 3 of those reports that we looked at a moment ago. This indicator that you can see on the slide here is my jumping off point. To determine what next steps I want to take and assess the value of the indicator to my own research, I considered a couple of things. First, the threat assess score, the CAL insights, and the overall threat rating and confidence. Now, the little check mark next to the multiple sources here on the screenshot tells me that this indicator is saved in at least one other community or source in ThreatConnect. Now, I can't necessarily see what other sources saved the indicator, but the fact that someone else found it interesting enough to store lets me know that I'm unlikely to be on a wild goose chase. If you look at the CAL or Collective Analytics Layer Insights card right under the threat assess score, you see a couple of different counters, including a counter that shows the number of false positives associated with this indicator, as well as the number of views this indicator had seen at the time that I took the screenshot. The observation counter shows whether this indicator has been seen by any network security architecture that is talking to ThreatConnect. So if that counter has more than 0, then that would tell me that it's highly likely the indicator I'm looking at was used in some kind of targeted activity. So from there, we have a couple of different options for next steps. We could continue to browse the sources that we have access to and see whether this indicator is part of other incidents. If you look at the screenshot at the top right here, you can see that this indicator is in all 3 of the incidents, the reports that we started with. You can also look at the investigation links. You can use the investigation links to see what some of the external sites have to say about this indicator. Since this is an IP address, I might want to check something like Alien Vault OTX or VirusTotal to see what domains and samples that they've seen associated with the indicator. Now, if this is a domain, I might want to check domain tools to find the register information or hybrid analysis to see if there are any available malware samples that communicate with the domain or something like that. Now, my number 1 go-to personally for stuff like this is usually VirusTotal, because I like to see what malware samples, URLs, and domains an indicator might be associated with. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later in the presentation. Now, another thing you could do is use a Spaces app to see if something like OpenDNS Investigate has additional information on this IP. That's something similar to what I did with the VirusTotal Spaces app here at the bottom screenshot there. Another thing that you can do is to check out the Reverse DNS tab to see what domains have been previously hosted on the IP. I didn't find a whole lot on this particular IP address, so I decided to take a look at some of the indicators from one of the associated incidents. Particularly, I decided to take a look at the Magic Hound campaign. So if I click on the Magic Hound campaign incident at the bottom of that previous page on that screenshot, I can navigate to view the indicators associated with that report. Now, as you can see in this screenshot on the left, that IP address we were just looking at is indeed associated with this incident as well. If I continue to scroll around, I can look at other associations, IP addresses, hosts, URLs, files, and things of that nature. And so while I was scrolling around, I noticed this com-adm.in host with a subdomain that references Microsoft. And that looked extra weird to me, so I decided to take a closer look. So I clicked on the suspicious host, and we can see that it is on the com-adm.in domain. The subdomain, as I said, references Microsoft. There's a little check mark next to multiple sources in the indicator analytics card, but unlike the IP address we looked at earlier, I can see that at least one other source, I can see one of the other sources that saves this indicator. In this case, that other source is my own org, the Threat Connect Research org. Similar to what we saw with the IP address a moment ago, I can see that no false positives have been reported with this indicator. There aren't any observations either, but there are 36 all-time views of the indicator. I can also see that while the indicator has a 3-score rating and a 50% confidence in the technical blogs and report source, my org has it listed at a 4-score rating and a 90% confidence. And this basically means that whoever added it to my organization analyzed the available information and determined that the indicator warranted a higher threat rating based on the criteria that we use to identify the appropriate threat rating and confidence for indicators. All right, so let's keep following the breadcrumbs on this host and use an investigation link. So for this one, I started with Alien Vault OTX, and that brought up the page that you see right here on the right. You can see from the results that the URL was checked several times in February, but received a connection error. However, if you look lower on the list, you can see that in September 2016, it was on the IP address 108.61.220.25. That was a bit intriguing, so made a note, continued on. Then I decided to check out VirusTotal to see what it had on the suspicious host, excuse me. VirusTotal tells us that the com-adm.in domain was registered by this gdetorres46@yahoo.com email address. It also shows several URLs in the domain that were identified as malicious, as well as a couple of likely malicious files associated with that host. To keep track of my work and to make sure that I don't forget any information that I found, I added the registered email address and the IP address to Threat Connect. And looking at the email address, I decided to run the OpenDNS Investigate Spaces app to see if there's anything else it could tell me. Now, this gave me the com-adm.in domain that we already knew about because of the suspicious host we were looking at a second ago. But it also gave me maildelivery5.com, which is a domain that was previously registered using the email address. Now, I know that this domain registration is historical because it has a little X next to the host under the current column. After adding in the IP address, I started my analysis of the indicator the same way I started my analysis of the previous indicators I looked at in this line of research. I first considered the threat score and was again encouraged to know that somebody else found this important enough to save in Threat Connect. And from there, I took a look at the reverse DNS and passive DNS results. Now, reverse DNS tells you what hosts are currently on an IP, and passive DNS tells you what hosts were historically on an IP. Now, at that point, I wasn't really convinced that I found everything there was to know about this IP address, so I decided to turn to one of my other personal favorite tools, which is VirusTotal. My VirusTotal search showed me several additional com-adm.in subdomains that were active around the same time as that Microsoft subdomain. Now, after the fact, I found that the mll.com-adm.in and chrome-up.date hosts were actually reported in other Shamoon2 and Magic Count reports. But the host that I found most interesting is the one that you see here in the box. And it might be because of my own personal history working in cybersecurity for an oil and gas company, but I really, found the oilandgasjobsearch.com-adm.in subdomain pretty interesting. So I decided to group my findings into a new incident. And this lets me store the information and add attributes and tags to further enrich and add context to the data. I also created a task for myself, you can see under the associated intel card, so that I know to go back later and take another look at these indicators to see if there's anything else that I can find. So what's next? Where can we go from there? So from here, there are several different avenues that I can pursue. I could continue down this research rabbit hole by taking a look at the tags associated with the incident, pivoting on the indicators even further to see if there's any additional information I can find, or checking additional sources to see if there's anything else there. I could also leverage integrations and have this information pushed to security products so that we can block it, or pull down additional information from something like domain tools or OpenDNS and things like that to further enrich the data that I found. I could run Playbook, which does some of those other things, like deploying things to the firewall, enriching the information further, or even assigning it to an analyst to get another set of eyes on this information, make sure that I'm not nuts. My personal favorite is to download PDFs, which I know seems kind of silly, but I like to keep a paper document of all of the things that I worked on, just so that I have them for my own records. But it also makes it really easy to just print out and take to your supervisor if you want to get their eyes on this kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, personally, I find value in this type of research because oftentimes it results in the discovery of additional information that might not have been reported. And this enables us as analysts to contribute to the defense of our organization. And sometimes, like in this case, we might find something that's especially relevant to our own organization or the work that we've done in the past in my case. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope that you can take one or two of these methods that I described and apply them to the work that you're doing to further enhance your own network defense postures. And I'm available for questions.
All right, thanks so much, Marika. Now we'll move on to questions. We've had a few people ask about the recording. We'll send that out within the next few days. So the next question I have is, these are really great directions, but I don't work in this industry. Do you think these methodologies would work across other industries as well?
Oh yes, these things are not specific to working in oil and gas, even though that was the example that I used. These things can be used to do research and build on threat research in pretty much any field. Anybody that's doing threat intel can use these methods and these techniques to follow their own line of research to its logical conclusion.
Great, thanks. And then the next question was, what is included in the PDF report you mentioned?
Oh, yes. So the PDF report will pull any information that you have saved in that particular group. So in the group that I showed, it would have printed out or pulled down the description of the incident name, the tags, and any associated indicators, attributes. Basically, all of the information that you have in that group, it'll pull down for you so that you can keep track of it in a paper copy or in a PDF on your computer if you want.
Great. And that was our very last question. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll be sending out the recording within the next few days. Thank you, Marika.
Thank you.